Okay.
That was to line up our audio because we're going to record. Hi, everybody, and me. Thank you all so much for joining us for another Superior on Tap presentation. My name is Jane. I'm the Director of Citizens for Safe and Clean Lake Superior. For those who aren't familiar, we are a local environmental nonprofit based here in Marquette, working to protect Lake Superior's watershed in the Upper Peninsula from environmental harm. We've been hosting Superior on Tap as a series of community lectures to provide educational opportunities to you, our community, to learn about environmental issues in the Superior watershed. Just a note before I talk about the presentation, because there are brochures throughout on some of your tables. A different issue, totally unrelated to tonight's presentation that we work on, is resisting industrial harm that could come to the watershed. One of those projects that is threatening industrial harm to the watershed is the proposed Copperwood mine on the other edge of the Porcupine Mountains. And right now there is $50 million in taxpayer money proposed in the state budget, which will be passed at any moment, that would go towards infrastructure for this mine. So if anybody is interested in taking action, calling reps about that issue, there might be a brochure on your table with a call script inside. If you don't have one and you want one, there are more by the door over there. Anyway, sorry about that. Tonight's presentation will bring you across the Big Lake to Isle Royale National Park, where a study on the predator-prey relationship of moose and wolves has been ongoing for decades. Citizen science is a crucial piece of the study, and our presenter, Karen Bacula, will walk you through her insights as the volunteer coordinator for the study. Karen is a retired teacher, having taught in Marquette area public schools. During her teaching career, she taught middle school science and then high school biology and environmental biology. Karen always believed it was important to teach about the place you live and worked to incorporate it into her teaching whenever possible. During the 7 years prior to her retirement, Karen was able to take almost 70 of her environmental biology students on 4-day backpacking trips to Isle Royale. Karen continues to spend time on Isle Royale, leading volunteers to help with the ongoing moose and wolf study, as well as with educators during a week-long workshop to support them in learning the methods used in the field study and how they can bring this and other aspects of environmental education to their classrooms. Karen believes the more we learn, the more we appreciate what surrounds us. When we know and appreciate our surroundings, then the more likely we are to work to protect them. Karen also serves on the board of our organization, Citizens for Spirit. So without further ado, please welcome Karen to the stage.
Hi, welcome. And thanks for being inside on this amazing evening. All right. So, hold on, I need to adjust. Oh no. Okay. That felt funny. Clearly I'm not a tech person. Okay, before I start this evening, last night as I was just reviewing slides and such, I learned about Jane Goodall's passing. I threw this in here for a number of reasons. Many of you are probably familiar with this, with Jane and the work she's done. But for me, my connection, first meeting Jane or learning about her, I was 11 years old, sitting in Mr. Brown's science class, and he put on this movie with Jane paddling in a canoe, studying the chimps in the jungle, and I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. And I grew up in Chicago and wasn't quite clear how to get to those places. But I knew I was intrigued with the outdoors, and Jane just hit a spot, planted a seed. And that stayed with me. 3 years later, I'm a freshman in high school, and I'm in Sally Jacobson's English class, and she starts talking about this place. She goes backpacking with friends, that there are moose and wolves. It's amazing. The only way to get there is on this boat, and people throw up, and it's just this whole thing. And I was on the edge of my seat saying, I am going there. And a few days later realized I had no idea the name of the place or even where it was, but I was going. So fast forward 20 years and random conversations and all kinds of things, and I got to Isle Royale. And thank you to Sally Jacobson for planting that seed in my head, which was where it came from. It landed hard and it grew. 15 years of visiting Isle Royale, I get a random phone call inviting me to be a leader for this Moose Watch and lead volunteers. They had no idea that Jane Goodall planted a seed in my head as an 11-year-old. So thanks to Jane, thanks to Sally, I get to be here tonight because, you know, I got the Isle Royale part happen. And though I did not become a famous world famous scientist, I get to work with one on a world famous study, and I'm really pleased with that. So thank you to Jane and Sally, and may she rest in peace, and all her work continue on. So, all right. All right, so now we're getting to this part. Moose Watch. It's citizen science, as Jane mentioned. It's a science supporting the Isle Royale Moose and Wolf study. As was mentioned, the study's been going on for decades, since 1958. It's the world's longest continuous predator-prey study in the world. And Moose Watch is the citizen science part of it, the data collection piece. And we'll get into those details as we go here. And clearly, I have to have this in front of me. All right, so as my teacher roots, here's what we're doing today. Introduction, I'll give you a little bit of citizen science. What is Moose Watch? What it's like to be a volunteer? What are we learning? What are the professional scientists learning? And then how you can apply to become a volunteer, and then we'll have a little bit of time for questions. Now this next slide, I always feel awkward because it's me. And I was told when doing slides, like, don't put a bunch of people they don't know or recognize, put you. And I'm like, yeah, it's really big and it's me. Anyway, you guys got the introduction from Jane. I am a retired teacher. I had the honor and pleasure of teaching in Marquette Public Schools for almost 30 years, middle school, high school, loved it. There wasn't a day I didn't love. During that time, made my trips to Isle Royale, became an enthusiastic participant out there, was able to bring students, which was amazing. That was some of the best trips I've ever taken. Through random conversations and over time, I became a leader as far as some of the groups, and now I'm the volunteer coordinator. So if people are interested in applying, I'll tell you about the process, and you'll then hear from me for several months prior to your trip. So citizen science, so I'll do a few things to clarify so we're all on the same page. I stole this definition directly out of the National Park Service. What is citizen science? So members of the public volunteer to help professional scientists collect data. There are so many citizen science projects out there in the world. You can find one. Some of them require some heavy lifting, some are lighter, but they're out there. All ages, all backgrounds. Don't feel like you need to be a science person. People that participate in this project come from all walks of life, all ages. It's amazing, the variety. So don't feel like, I'm not a scientist, I can't do this. The professionals will tell you what you need to do. So, and then just to clarify, in case somebody's not sure, so Isle Royale, oh look, there it is, right there. Biggest island and the biggest lake. 40 plus miles out from the Keweenaw Peninsula, about 15 from Minnesota and Ontario. Most of that island, 90+% is wilderness. It has a long human history as well, which is a whole other conversation with other people who have that down better. But it's also a unique place in that it's kind of a simple ecosystem, in that there are a lot of animals that we have here on the mainland that are not on the island. So the peak predator-prey relationship is the moose and wolves. There are no bear, white-tailed deer, skunks, raccoons, things like that. So it is kind of a simple system. Plus the island closes down pretty soon, and there will be no humans out there for the winter, except for winter study, but no visitors. So it's a unique kind of place. And so Moose Watch. Again, it's the citizen science aspect of what is supporting the moose and wolf study. Yes, they're the lead scientists and the folks from Michigan Tech who are doing the heavy lifting and data and such, but it's the volunteers who come out during the summer to help for over 4 separate one-week time stretches for this project. And most people, when we talk about Moose Watch, think, oh, we're gonna go see moose. You don't ever see them. I've done, I think I counted about 15 or 16 regular Moose Watch groups that I've led and another dozen teacher groups. And I think in all that time, Carly, did we see any?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. So every now and again we see one, but Carly came as one of the teacher groups, so.
You gotta be with me.
Gotta be with Carly, yeah. But when you're in the backwoods, like trouncing through all this vegetation, everything scatters for miles. So it's not the live ones that we usually get to see, but what we end up looking for is the bones of moose. So our quarry is really slow moving because it's not going anywhere. But yeah, so we're after bones, and we're after, in particular, certain bones to provide more specific data for the collection. I'll get into which ones those are. But this is a skeleton that was put together. It's the west end of the Isle Royale at the Visitor Center there. Have any of you seen this one? Have you been out there to see it? A couple people. If you ever go, the west end has a beautiful visitor center with this moose. And what I learned a couple years ago, it's actually a compilation of a couple moose. It's got the male skull, but apparently it's female, and so it's a nice conglomeration of moose. But it works, you know. Yeah. So the bones that we collect, I'll give you the visual here. So we're after the skull and the mandibles, the lower jaw, pelvis if there's rough arthritis and such. We end up looking for the incisors, which are the lower teeth right in front. And then we end up looking also for the metatarsal, which is this bone. If you notice, this moose has 3 leg bones. This metatarsal is the equivalent of what is on the top of our foot. So they walk on their tiptoes, and that's what gives them this third part. Okay, so those are our key bones, but we pay attention to all of them in between. So, what is it like to be a volunteer? First you apply, and you then wait for your application to be accepted, and that usually process begins in January, and we go through the whole thing, people apply. Once you're accepted, you start getting emails from me, and we communicate back and forth as a group, and we end up doing a Zoom so we can get things squared away. And when it comes time, if you're headed out in May, you'll be out on this boat, the Voyager, which leaves from Minnesota and goes to the west end of the island. And this is not the best picture, but this is the Ranger 3 out of Houghton. That boat you would take if you were going on a June or August trip. So our groups get on the boat and head to the island. And once we get to the island, there's a bunch of prep time. And so even though we've talked and we've got things squared away, we're going through gear, we're talking to Ralph Peterson and finding out where we're going and where we're headed. His wife, Candy Peterson, and these are 2 of the most lovely people in the world. She'll go through the checklist and make sure we have everything, because once we head out, we're gone for the week. So this one was the start of a trip, and it was rainy and about 44 degrees. So you have to, I always tell people, pack your gear, pack your sense of humor, and your patience, because everything is slow, and you gotta laugh, because if you don't, it's not good. So this was at the start of a sunnier trip later in the season. So we go through the maps with everybody, we check and see everybody's going, we've got everything, we've double checked, we're ready to roll. And from this point, what happens is each of our individual groups, and each full team varies in size from maybe 18 volunteers. It's usually 5 or 6 people per group, and there might be 3 or 4 groups per team. So we'll divide up and head to and get dropped off at our different areas. Sometimes we get dropped off at a trailhead. Sometimes we just walk out into the woods. Other times we just get dropped off at a spot that is not a trailhead. And our walking. Though these pictures are showing some trail, There's kind of a trail here. We spend most of our time walking off trail. We might use the trails to get to places, but most of it is bushwhacking. In May, it's not so bad on the west end because trees are pretty evenly spaced, vegetation is low. And come August or June, things are taller, mosquitoes and black flies come out. But you can smile and nod because you brought your patience and your humor and your head net, and you can just keep going through. If it rains, you've got your rain gear because you have to have that. And we just keep moving. A lot of this, especially in August, and I don't have a whole lot of August pictures because they wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because it's nothing but a wall of trees. And you're like, yeah, it's a wall of trees. And you're like, but we hike through that. And so these were a couple photos where you see parts of people. So you might hike with your group and only know that they're there because you've heard them for the last hour. But it can get to be real thick. But it's also really magical because along the way, there's also sometimes rocks. It's one of those. We'll end up in lake areas that sometimes other people are not going to get to because we're not on trail, and we're set your GPS and go. I've done a lot of beaver dam crossing. I'm good at that now. And sometimes they're really solid, and sometimes they're not. I will confess that every time I see, if I get a young person on the team, they're always really excited. I'll try it first. Well, I can do, okay, if you want to do it. They do, and they're great. And then I'll provide support for the others who are a little more concerned. But I have gone across first, but when you get somebody who's excited and they're ready to go, okay. But we've crossed many a beaver dam, some better than others. Hiking and walking in these trips tends to be slow. People are like, how many miles are we going to cover today? And you might be like, 4. And they're like, 4, 4 miles. And then they realize that 9 hours later, 4 hours can take a long time. And a lot of that's due to the terrain. It's due to how many dead moose you might find, because you're collecting data. So we don't measure necessarily this is how much, but here's what we're hoping to accomplish and get to another spot. Because oftentimes, even when you look at the maps or the GPS, it's like, well, this is the ridge. If beavers have been through, we've come to places where it's like, okay, it's just another half mile, and you can't go anywhere because it's been flooded by beaver dams and the water. So there's always that sense of adventure of, okay, now what? Patience and sense of humor. Regular friends with us. But again, it's magical because when you're hiking through this, we're getting to stop. And yes, you can see these things when you're on the trail, but when you're stopping, you're like, oh, nobody else has seen this wood lily. It's just us. And you wake up and then just outside your tent is this cool spider web. Yeah, you can see that anywhere, but it's just us doing this because you're with your group for the week. So you're seeing those magical things and seeing the spring when the skunk cabbage are first coming out. So that's the beauty of walking slow, that you get to see a lot more. So in addition to looking for those moose bones, which I'll talk about how we go to find them, but it's just cool to see. These are photos of some lichens. Isle Royale has over 600 different species of lichens. And it's the hot spot in the northern Great Lakes region area. And there have been times we've paused and just looked at lichen because they were there. It was pretty amazing, especially after a rain and you get the contrast. But so as we're walking and looking and everybody's discovering things, and one of the things I really enjoy about the teacher groups is sometimes it takes us longer because there's something about the teachers that just notice everything. And so we just kind of keep going through it. I think I've maybe slightly annoyed a few of the regular volunteers a few times, and I'm walking through, I'm like, but it's a patch of calypso orchids. And they're like, mm-hmm. I'm like, no. And so they need their patience and humor when I lead. But to stop and do these things. But the real quarry that we're after Oh, wait, this is one more thing we see. So moose scat. So it's a good clue that, okay, moose have been through here. This is winter scat, okay? And if you head out to the island in the spring, you'll often see that on the trails. But the reason it's pelletized and looks like that is that during the winter, the moose will eat fir twigs, or not fir, the fir needles and the buds on the end. So it's a really kind of gritty diet. And so those pellets, when they start drying especially, they just kind of turn to dust. They're very dried up fir needles. And then come spring, you get more of the cow patty type of thing when they're eating the water vegetation and things that have more water in it. And if you step on one of these and you don't realize it, if you're walking through vegetation and you hit one, they're incredibly slippery. And I've watched people do, one of those kind of things. But that's one of those things that we'll be walking through that vegetation, you can't make it through and your backpack is on and you're trying to squeeze through, and there's a pile of moose droppings. You're like, how did that animal get through here? They're huge and they're big. But it stops and makes you think about the whole overall picture of what's moving out there and what's going on. But like I said, in the big picture, what we're really after is this. And the way we find these moose bones is one of two ways. One is we might be given a target, meaning sometime during the winter or spring or some point, somebody in the field, a visitor, maybe during winter study when they fly over in the plane, they have spotted a dead moose, so we can get GPS points, and then one of the groups will go out and head to that target, which is great because you know you're onto something. If we don't have targets, we start at point A and we say, oh look, there's a body of water over there. And we hike and we just do scans, we do a sweep. So we'll walk shoulder to shoulder with some distance and we just watch the ground. So it's a true needle in the haystack experience. The spring groups tend to have it easier because they don't have the vegetation, but sometimes in the summer, we've come across some things too, but it can be quite the challenge. Sometimes again, the piles of bones are nice because they just ended up in a pile. So we just have to sort through them. Sometimes it's, here's a random skull flipped upside down, and then we start doing some searches. So the other way, so prior to 2018-19, when they brought some of the new wolves out to boost up the population, a lot of moose were starving. And so it was not uncommon, but not unheard of. And my groups and probably 3 or 4 different occasions came across something like this where the moose just laid down and died, just starved. This is a female that was collared. This is around her, it's a hair mat, it's the fur that came off of her. This is another one where it looks like wolves and foxes may have fed a little bit just because the bones are pulled apart. But same idea, it just pretty much is right in one zone. So again, this was found by walking. Sometimes we did find a couple by smell. We were on, and I don't think this was your group, Carly. We were scattering or looking for the scattered bones for one moose, and we were finding them, and one of the group members stood up and was like, I smell something. And so there's 6 people walking around looking like beagles. Everybody's noses are in the air. And of course the wind shifts, it's like, no, it's here. And we as people are not very good at doing that, especially when the wind shifts a little bit. But finally we found a dead moose very similar to this one that was found by smell. And at that point, we don't do much except take a GPS point and then let the critters do their thing, and then we come back and it's a target for somebody next year. So that way, pre-GPS days, before we use GPS, and if the groups found something like this, they took the parts, they had to do field cleaning on them. So I came in GPS days, it's so much better. So, all right, so once we find these, what we start doing right away, again, awkward, is we start doing photographs. So there's one person in the team who's assigned photographer. We take pictures of bones as they lie, just so we can see kind of how long they may have been here, what condition, how far they're scattered, what's going on. So we start doing this, and while, in this case, I'm taking photos, the rest of my team is getting antsy and doing the dance, and then I let them loose and they start searching for other bones so we can do some photos. So we end up searching the area. Searching an area can take a few minutes because the bones are in a pile. Sometimes we search for 40, 45 minutes and we're scanning and we're looking, and just when you think you haven't found anything, something shows up and then everybody's all excited again. And we end up finding more. But also as part of this process, we also sort the bones. So there's a little start of a pile of ribs here. And we're also collecting data. So we have some data cards that we fill out. And what we're recording is, we're gonna describe the location. We're gonna use the GPS points where they are. We're gonna describe the vegetation down low, the dominant tree species. We'll describe the ground litter. We'll count the bones. We'll note what kind of condition they were in. We'll look to see if we can determine cause of death. Was it a wolf kill? Did it starve? Maybe it had been sick. Trying to figure out some of those pieces. Are the bones chewed? So there's a lot of things. It's basically Moose CSI. So you're out there with every possible clue you can get, because what we bring back, Rolf Peterson has on all of these little cards just organized in order. Every find gets an autopsy number, and so what we bring back from the field is like what they have for their data. So we need to be as thorough as possible. And so this is just a little bit more of the searching. So this would have been a spinal column vertebrae that just was kind of laying there, very nice. This was a big bull. It had been wolf killed. We did find some chewed on bones, and again, big hair mat and antlers. And then as part of this, we also document more photos, because we don't bring all of the bones back. That's not what we're trying to do. So we've got the bones and the identifying markers. This 12 means that this set of bones was the 12th set of bones that my group found that week, which is a lot to find. My group this year in August, we found 3 sets of bones. The other one team found 1 set, the other found none. We had a team in May, they came back with 27 sets. So again, when you go, where you go, makes a difference. So we sort, we count, we photograph, we document. And again, most of these volunteers don't have a science background. They're coming out for love of the work, wanting to participate, being a part of this study, and they figure out how to identify bones and count them. It's great. So these are start of the bones, some of that we're collecting. We do, excuse me, we do collect the skulls. It'll tell the gender of what the animal was. Also, we can tell health and start getting some age. These are teeth that are stained, and this is jawbone that's starting to wear away and has worn away. So that moose was not feeling it very nicely in its mouth. So if you started having your roots exposed in your gums, it's not going to feel good. This one is a pelvis, just kind of in situ, and we do take a look at parts of the pelvis. And if they do show arthritis, we do collect those. Otherwise, we just take some real close-up pictures. We also collect incisors. So these are the lower front teeth. So moose are unique in that they've got, in the skull, in the top part, they've got molars in the back, no teeth from midway forward. So it's just flat palate. And on the bottom, they've got molars, big gap, and then 8 incisors, 4 on each half of the mandible. And so these are the teeth, and these are kind of like the golden prize of finding everything. It's like we found all of this stuff and the incisors. And what they can do with this is they can do a horizontal cut across the tooth and polish it like crazy. And each year the moose will lay down a new layer of dentin, and they can count it as rings and age the moose. And if we can figure out when the moose died, which has gotten much closer, especially if they're fairly recent deaths, and how old the moose is, they can go go back and get kind of a bigger picture of this is when it was born, and here's what the years were like in between and how old the moose was. So this gives a good aging piece. Well, one of the other things that we'll do if we come across a moose that is relatively recently killed is we'll cut into one of the long bones to check the marrow. If it was not killed by a wolf, we were doing this mostly when the moose were starving, to just try to see how starved they were. This one had been deceased for a while. There was no marrow in its bones, but most of it I think is just because it aged out. This one had died within the fairly recent, I don't remember exactly how long, but it had some marrow in its bone, but it got to the point where it was just really like waxy and icky. This guy had so little body fat that its body was using the energy from the marrow to help it survive. So that's what an indication of like how far along the moose have gone into this starvation process. And we were finding moose bones with some of the people I was with that these guys were suffering pretty bad. And then if we get to these, this makes it obvious that the wolves were here. This is the end of a long bone that got broken up so the wolves could get the marrow out, because they love it for all of its fat and nutrients and those kind of things. This bone, I had found it was this dark part, it was buried, and just this pointy part was sticking up and a little bit at the top. And excuse me, I got kind of poked and I pulled it out and I thought, oh man, this moose had fallen and broken its leg. This is sad. It was in pain and awful. And when I brought it back, I brought a photo back and said, yeah, this is what this was. I was informed that a wolf had cracked this bone. And if you were to see how thick that is, it makes you appreciate what they're able to do. So this is the just the impacts of after a wolf kill. And then also as part of this with the data collection, sometimes we find antlers, so we'll find sheds. And we collect data on these two. We GPS point them, and again, do a little bit of what the area was like, and then we'll take some measurements. So this is the pedicel, the part that attaches to the moose skull. So what I'm doing over here and they're holding is we're measuring the widest point, and that then goes back to give an idea how big the male moose was, an age range that it was probably in, because what the males will do is their first couple years their antlers will be a little bit smaller, and as they reach their sexual prime, their reproduction, we're ready, best part of their lives, their antlers are biggest, most symmetrical, they'll have a nice big pedicel, and as they age it kind of regresses a little bit. So this provides more information. We don't carry those bones out, those stay. This is, again, just another close-up of what we run into with mouth problems with moose. And so much like looking at a live moose, you might say, oh, look, it's beautiful, and it looks great, and it's eating, it's this and that. And you may not realize that it's got this going on, it has this going on inside. So it might actually be feeling kind of icky. So the amount of information we can get from the bones is quite incredible. And then again, the pelvis, the part that we don't take unless there's a problem. This is a decent looking pelvis. This is the part where the femur would fit in. And this is one that has arthritis. You can see how it's kind of spread out and flattened and stretched in weird ways. This is something we would take back so that they've got documentation that, yep, it's another case of arthritis in moose. And arthritis is not uncommon. So as the moose age, they get arthritis, their teeth start going bad. They run into a lot of the same problems we do. And this is that metatarsal. Remember that foot bone, but it's part of their leg bone situation? We take one of these are healthy. This is one that had broken and healed on its own. And that's why you want to get a cast and stay off your foot when the doctor says stay off your foot, because that's what happens. And the reason these are collected is that this bone stops growing basically after about a year. And so what this will indicate is the length, they can measure the length. And for calves that were born or in utero and a healthy mom who had plenty of food and good resources, and the baby was, had good resources its first year, the metatarsal will be a little longer. If there were struggles, if mom was underfed, if it was a tough year for the young one when it was born, that metatarsal won't grow as much. So again, that kind of adds, like we'll talk about the findings, a picture of what may have been going on in the environment during this moose's lifetime, especially during its first year. These are vertebrae. These are some pretty decent ones, still in the pile as I found them. These have arthritis. So if you're ever wondering what arthritis looks like, it's really ugly. It's bumpy and lumpy, and for this one it would have been incredibly painful. But these are the kind of things, so I mentioned we will always take the skull and the mandibles and those golden incisors, the metatarsal, and any bones that are anomalies. If they're showing something weird, if they're showing a break that healed, if they're showing arthritis, we'll take those because that, again, adds to the big picture of things. So that we can see what the moose was like, again, what was its health like, what that may have been saying about the weather and the environment at the time. This is a table full of, ew, what's that, bones? So I haven't figured out what's going on with this one yet, but this one has lost all its teeth and back. They're worn flat and a big gap. This one has a big growth in its jaw, bone infection. This is one I think one of my groups found. The jaw was broken, but it yet had all of this other funky stuff going on. So whether it broke because it had this or broke and then grew that, I'm not sure, but that was icky. These are 3 examples of metatarsals. That healthy one, these are 3 that broke and healed all poorly. So again, so the big picture, like, all right, so there's the moose with a broken bone. Also kind of tied to these things with animals that have broken bones, bad teeth, bad infections in their bones, are not very strong animals. And those are the ones we tend to find with wolf kills. So the wolves do tend to go after the weaker ones because they're easy. These guys are not gonna run very well. The ones with the bad infections in their mouths, think about when you've got a bad cold or something with your teeth and you've got a smell, the wolves can pick that up and find these guys. So they're weeded out by the wolves. And one of the last problems that moose have, but people have, this is a bull moose skull, and up here is that pedestal point where the antler attaches. But these spots are osteoporosis. So if you're wondering what that looks like, these are dark because they're stained after being in the ground and outside. But the males tend to show a fair amount of osteoporosis because they use so much calcium for their antlers every year. So again, this will give us an age, what was the health, what was the overall condition of this moose. So now that we've collected all these bones, what do we do with them? We put them on our backpacks and haul them back. This again is where when you get like new people who are very excited, oh, can I carry that? Well, it's really fragile. Can you be careful? Yeah, okay. And they get to carry stuff. This was a group, however, where we all had to carry stuff. This is, I think he's got a couple skulls. This is my pack with 2 skulls. I've got the mandibles in my hand, and I had other stuff in here. 2 more skulls, another skull in the pelvis, some vertebrae, and some other stuff packed in here. So we had come out fairly loaded after that trip. This was a group from 2 years ago. 4 of us had gone out, went to an area that hadn't been searched in a while, and by midway through the 3rd day, we realized we had more bones than we could carry. And so we had to send a message back and ask for a pickup of bones. Got rid of, I think, 7 or 8 sets, went back out in the field, and did it again. So I think in the end we had maybe 14 sets of bones. Kathy's local, I don't know if she's in the audience, anyway, some of you may know Kathy. But when we come back, we're all smiley, and we talk about how difficult it was and how much fun it was. And could you believe that rainstorm? And could the mosquitoes have been worse? And yet it was the best time. And then there was that time I had to pee in the woods, but there was just raining, and how do I do that? And all the mosquitoes were there. And then you come back, and what makes this special, we get to get cleaned up, and we have a hot meal served, and then we forget all that stuff, and everybody signs up again. We're like, yes, can we get dirty? Can we get knee deep in a swamp and get our backpacks stuck and have mosquitoes up our nose and say, this is fun? And then we're like, yeah, we'll do it again. But that's kind of the whole run through the general picture of it. So for this citizen science trip in particular, it's a lot of physical work. We're hauling our packs during heat, during rain, during whatever. We're all through it. But again, patience and sense of humor carries you a long way, just because you've got to stay with the group and make those things go. But when we bring this stuff back, and what has been learned over the years is, when the study was set up, it was to help understand predator-prey ecology and understanding humans' relationship with nature and all of these systems, and hoping that by understanding this simple system, with it's just moose and wolf as the primary predator-prey species on this island, that maybe some of this information can be used in other more complex systems. And a lot of what's being discovered, because predictions are made, and some of you may remember in your biology books, if the prey goes up, the predators will go up, and then it falls, and it's this beautiful up and down roller coaster. And what they found out is that's not quite always the case. And what has happened a lot with predictions is they're not always quite right, but what has been real valuable, especially with the length of this study, is that they can go back and look and say, oh, now we understand what's been happening. That can help us maybe understand what might happen next. But it's more of a reflection piece, and like understanding the history and rebuilding these populations through these bones, and understanding the health, the age, the impacts the wolf had, that starvation had, and building a big picture, rather than saying, well, if this is going up, then this is going to go down. So that's become a real important piece, and to make these connections. And I'm just going to make sure I didn't skip. And so, so just, it's, what's interesting, and I didn't put in here because I had this fear that it was just not going to work, and that I'd be doing a lot of clicking, and it would just, never mind. At the websites I'll give you, there is a graph where they show 5-year segments of the moose and wolf population changes. And if you notice, when you look at it, no 5-year segment looks like another 5-year segment. And the first half of the study looks different than the second half, just because there are some things that happened that nobody expected. Extremely harsh winters. Back in 1996, the moose population was well over 2,000. In 96, it was a long, hard winter with a late spring. There is another critter on the island that gets the moose. It's moose ticks, or winter ticks. They're only active during the winter, and they're just on the moose, and some of the moose can get tens of thousands of them. So I didn't put those pictures in, sorry. I could pull them up though if anybody wants to see them later. I did that once. It was like a screen full of ticks. People were like, oh, okay, so I took that out, you're welcome. But that winter, with the late coming spring, the ticks living, the population so high, no food, it was like 1,800 moose had died. And it was just done. And it was like, you don't predict that. And so with that, of course, then for a couple of years, the wolf population fed well. But there were so many moose on that had died that year that we still look or keep our eyes open for moose from the winter of 96. And the reason we can mostly identify them is because nothing was scavenging them, because there was just so much. Like, animals were like, we've got too much going on. Flies were laying eggs, and so we could find maggot casings inside their noses and their nasal cavities. And the first year I had done Moose Watch, we found 96 moose. And it was like, you pull it out, and you're like, oh, yeah, now I see. I can tell. So there are things like that. There's also the case in the 1980s where somebody brought over their dog illegally to the island. It was one of the first known cases of parvovirus. The wolves contracted it, and for a couple years they were not successful in breeding. A lot of the wolves died, so it took their population from 50 down to about 20. Nothing we could predict. So taking this information, looking at that, and saying, okay, this is what happened, we know it happened, and then being able to gather data from the animals that have died, and then basically starting to build a picture of what this has looked like over the years. And it's pretty amazing when you get into it. The website I'll share has annual reports that are really well written and easy to read. That can give you some real interesting details about some of these things. So it's an ongoing study. Most studies like this only last a handful of years, so you get a snippet. But when you put things together over time, this is 65 years now? Well, 67 years. So that's a lot of time, a lot of data. This year, there's over 6,000 moose that have been collected or sampled, as part of this collection. So there's a lot of information that's available to be used for this. And as going through this and kind of looking this and wanting to kind of sway this with the citizen science part of things of, yeah, there's way cool, amazing stuff to learn from the science, and to encourage people, you, to find a citizen science project, to get involved with something and to learn what's going on out there. So much data can be collected by people who are just willing to spend some time. And if you don't think the idea of mosquitoes and wet rain and swamps, and if that doesn't appeal to you, organizations also appreciate contributions. And so there are ways you can help and get involved as long, take some time to look and see. The IsleRoyaleWolf.org is the annual report spot. If any of you have become intrigued enough about thinking, I want to wear a heavy backpack that gets heavier all week, and I can do this, and I can do all that stuff, go to IsleRoyaleWolf.org. You'll find the application. We'll start posting the dates, usually December, January, and applications will open, and we'll go through them. You can say you heard this talk and you were so inspired about getting that pack on and joining in, because I look back and I will confess there's usually one day each trip where I'm standing on a ridge and the lightning is coming in, or I'm not making up over your knee deep in a swamp with your backpack stuck on a tree and the mosquitoes. That was my first trip. And I'm like, this is awful. I'm volunteering to do this. And then I finished. I said, I'm coming back. And I again, almost 30 trips total since 2012. So it's a little bit addicting. Carly's done it. So it's got some magic to it. And again, it's not everybody's cup of tea, but there is a cup of tea out there for you. So see what you can find. If you're interested in helping to support the project, wolfmoosefoundation.org is where you can look. There's some sheets at each of the doors if you want to share your email. You can get updates, you can learn about the project. You can again find out, yay, it's time to apply to go get out your boots and go hike and look for bones. And I think, I can't use my phone because I can't read it with my glasses, so. That's all my notes say. So, with that, sunset on the island. So, got a few minutes for questions if people have questions. Low teens. Yeah, low to mid-teens in there. And again, it's, whatever those little variables are, but yeah, that's...
So is a 15-year-old moose an
It's getting elderly, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
they're getting there.
Do you ever find wolf bones?
I try every year. The question was, do I ever find wolf bones? They have been a few that have been found, but those are tiny. They're tiny, and I've been there when somebody's brought some back, and yes, I've been a little jealous. But yeah, so on occasion they're found. We'll find beaver skulls and fox skulls and things, but yeah, other than that, moose ones, the big ones that are heavy. No. Oh, go ahead.
Do you camp in the backcountry, or do you typically go back to a campsite?
Most often we're camping in the backcountry. So we're off trail, and it's beautiful and amazing, and you're in places that people don't go. And what I've also learned is that, like, just because the map says there's a lake doesn't mean you can necessarily access that lake real well. So it brings its own special challenge. But once you find that camping spot, it's really it's magical. Yeah, it becomes hard to come back to the campgrounds because then there's people and the ground is hard.
What are some of the things that you've learned about yourself through this experience?
What have I learned about myself? A different kind of patience with myself sometimes. I've learned that walking slow is what needs to be done. The humor part, I try to pull that up as much as possible. I've also learned that when I look at my pack and say, oh, it started at 42 and we've just added a bunch of bones, I can still carry it. Yeah, this ripe old age, there's always that, okay, somebody can help me get it on my back, but I think the biggest pack I ever carried out, which to me was my, I can do it, was about a 58-pound pack. And we had some bones with us, packed them out, but we had found some others that we had cached closer to the trail, so we didn't have to carry it the full distance. So we had just over about 4.5 miles with that pack, but it was myself, a young gentleman, and then 2 other men who were my age, maybe a little older. And when we got back, we weighed, and all of our packs were in the 57 and 58 pound. And so yeah, finding that, I think that digging deep.
Yeah.
And that's the big part. That's one of the biggest challenges. People are like, I've got this physically. Dig deep, because you still have 6 days. Yeah. So yeah. Did you have?
Yeah. If you find a moose carcass, like on a private trip, let's say, is there anything we can do to bring that back and be part of the research outside of?
Yeah. So the question is, if you're out on your own backpacking trip and you find a carcass, yay! So the best thing you can do, GPS it or get as close to the location as you can. Share that with the rangers, or if you're able, have you been to the island?
Yeah, we actually found a moose carcass out in Chippewa Harbor, so we didn't inform anybody about it. So there was most of it there, minus that.
Was that this year?
This was
2 years ago.
2 years ago? They probably.
Not this summer, last summer.
summer.
Okay. And the only reason I ask is a lot of word like that tends to spread. So the best one is to get the information to the rangers. If you've been to one of the campgrounds, Candy and Ralph Peterson come over and do a program. Is if you happen to be there, let them know, and they'll send out the volunteers. They don't recommend that you pick up the bones because you have to have a permit. And last thing you want to do is be walking down the trail and be like, yeah, no.
Yeah, it wasn't on.
No.
We were, but we didn't find
I'm not turning you in, but but don't steal the bones, okay? But yeah, I just notify somebody, and that's actually, I got a message just the other day that somebody had found a bull moose that was killed by wolves. It had a collar, so that's where they were able to find it, and yeah, and off they went. So they had the information from that. So.
So you said some of the moose have collars. Are you able to, like, do they get tagged? Do you know how many moose there are on the island?
So for a while, one of the researchers with the Moose and Wolf study had collared a number of females. So there was a known, I think she did a total of 20 or 30, and so they watched their progressions back and forth. I think she has stopped, but the Park Service has done some. So the best way they get the moose count is they go do what's called winter study. So Ralph Peterson and a couple of the graduate students, they will go over for 6 weeks during the winter and do flyovers. They've got set plots that they've had for the last 60 years, and they just do slow, low circles and count the moose and then extrapolate from there. And so their counts tend to be pretty accurate. They're not going to, within the range. But what they're doing with the collars is mostly just kind of tracking. And one of the years, because they weren't sure how far moose moved, and a couple of the females had, I think, just transversed the island. Nobody had realized they were doing that, which is kind of cool. So yeah.
Is Moose Watch interested in any moose outside of the area? Outside the area, not on.
So the question is Moose Watch interested in moose not on Isle Royale? I think to the degree of what's going on with them, but as far as any finds here, they wouldn't collect anything from that. Yeah. So it'd be more just what's happening to the population. I know that in Maine, the winter ticks are really hitting the moose out there, and so we've talked about that and what they're trying to do in Maine to bring that down and help the population of moose, because the tick population is really happy. And I'm sure they've got really good pictures. Yeah.
I know you wanted to ask a question.
Oh, well, I think it was answered.
Oh.
I just didn't know how many moose were on the island today. You already kind of answered it.
Yeah, I think there's just over 600, 700. Yeah.
How many wolves?
Wolves are in the 30s. Wolves are in the 30s. Yeah.
Is there any migration between the mainland and the island for either of the species that
So migration between the island for the species. There have been, in various times, moose spotted swimming from the mainland to the island. I don't know that there have been any seen swimming back. They're able to do. Moose are really strong swimmers, but they still arrive to the island exhausted. It's not a frequent thing. They won't walk on the ice. They don't like that. So if moose are going to move, they'll swim. And moose will swim between the islands within the island, because there's many little smaller islands. Some of the females will go out to a distant island and have calves, and then come back. Wolves, on the other hand, aren't going to swim that distance, and they'll come over on an ice bridge from Minnesota or Canada. And some of them will leave, which has been documented too. But there have been many fewer ice bridges the last number of years because things have been warmer. So not too much migration that way, which was part of the population issue. They've had a couple move, but in 1997, I think it was, a wolf came over from the mainland, and he basically gave a good genetic boost to the population. His genes were found in a number of packs on the island, but it was also a saving grace because they were getting so inbred. Yeah. So, is there? Yeah.
What is the relationship between the National Park Service and the Wolf Moose study?
So the question is the relationship between the National Park Service and the Moose Wolf study. For a number of years, for many years, the Park Service helped financially support and provide some staff, especially during the winter, but it's mostly independent of each other. So the study is based out of Michigan Tech, and so that's where the research is from. So it's an independent, and there are many other research studies going out there from other universities as well. So there's a little bit of a.
When you're in the field, how do you know that the carcass hasn't been surveyed prior?
Oh, so how do we know if it hasn't been surveyed prior? Generally, once we have gone through all the sorting and things like that, we tend to leave it kind of look like the humans have found it. So then we might leave the bones in a nicer pile, or we'll also notice that the skull is missing, the metatarsal is missing. So we're finding key things gone. We're pretty, yeah. But if it's one of those that's just lying there, yeah. Way in the back.
How common is it when you're out to encounter wolves? And if you do, what is the procedure if you come across one?
So in general, wolf encounters are small to nothing. You may have seen reports these last year or two about some friendly wolves that have been showing up in the more populated area. Those, unfortunately, the Park Service had to put one down earlier in the late summer. Normally, wolves are a non-thing. I've been going out there since 1997, and prior to this last couple of years when wolves have been kind of showing up, I've had three wolf encounters. One walked through a campground, maybe it was two, and then I actually had a pack of wolves hanging out behind my tent that I didn't know. I was watching a cow and her two calves, and when I went into my tent, I heard this crazy roaring, like lion that was having a bad thing going on. And I didn't know what it was, so I got out of my tent, and the guy from the site next to me was yelling, "Go away!" And I said, "What are you yelling at?" He said, "Wolves." I said, Where'd they come from?" He said, "From behind your tent." So when I came into my tent, they went out to go hunting. I heard the whole skirmish, nothing died, the wolves got away, the moose got away, and that was really exciting. Once I found out that, the sound of a defensive female moose, it was frightening. Yeah, that was the one thing I was like, because I had no idea what that was. But yeah, anyway. Question?
You mentioned winter ticks a couple of times. Is there anything you can do to prevent them or control them?
The question is how can you prevent winter ticks? Don't be a moose and don't go there in the winter. Yeah, that's the beautiful part. When I mentioned that Isle Royale doesn't have, skunks and bears and deer, there's no ticks either. So you can field work, there's no tick checks. We count mosquito bites and black fly bites, but that's it. But yeah, the ticks don't start getting active until now, and then they're gonna latch onto the moose for the winter. But they will, if you show up on a carcass that has a fur mat or is fairly fresh and you go to investigate, they are incredibly fast to climb. And so I have done the old, I'm just gonna check. And then there's 8 ticks climbing, so. But they don't embed, so you can pop them off, and then everybody else runs away. And where's my group? So. Yeah.
So do you know, are the moose developing any type of adaptation to that tick population? Do they have thicker skin? Is there anything that we can find and study that says they are adapting?
I don't think so. So the question is adaptation to the ticks with the moose? No. What they end up doing, and this is another thing that can really get them for the winter, is the ticks are an irritant and they make them itch. So they scratch and they pull their fur and they rub on trees. And so when you end up seeing moose in the spring, instead of seeing them fur covered, they'll have big black patches, and that's bare skin. And if their fur looks gray, that's broken hairs from damage of trying to itch and scratch and things like that. So I took those pictures out too. I should have left one. They always look so sad. It's like, here comes the big moose, and it's just like bare spots. And, yeah. I've got 1, 2, 3. One.
To kind of add up to the adaptations, are there any genetic differences between mainland moose and the moose on Isle Royale?
Genetic differences. I don't believe there are any genetic differences, but they are not quite as big. Like if you go to Alaska, you're like, moose. Here you're like, moose. But they're still big. Don't get me wrong. It's like, but I've seen the two, and the first Alaska moose I saw, I was like, oh, that's for real. But yeah, they're still not to be messed with. So, 2.
So what do you know about the main causes of death of moose? Is it what you see, like the
Main causes of death. Prior to this wolf introduction, a lot of starvation. Then when the wolves were introduced, it was about 50-50, and now it's pretty much wolf kills. So some of them, they do get to old age, but as moose get older and weaker, they become prey. And when there's a lower number, that's how they go versus just the lingering part of things. So it sounds awful, but maybe better than starving. 3.
Do we know about what the populations are of the wolf and the moose right now?
Wolves are in the 30s. I don't have the count. That would have been like from last year's winter study, and same with the moose is in the 600s-ish range. So the population has come down. And the vegetation, and so the other key thing, it's like, so moose and wolves and that. So the thing to think about with a large population of moose is the impact they have on vegetation. And if you've ever been out there, if you're at the west end of the island, you can see fir trees that are about this tall and are 50 years old, will never get taller, can't reproduce because they can't get past a certain height, and they're just gnarly and icky. It's just because the moose have been chewing them back. And same kind of things, with saplings and trees in the springtime with leaves. So moose have a huge impact. So the one benefit is now that the fir trees and the poplars and aspens and those, they get to grow. Anything else? Well, again, thank you for coming out, you guys. It's a beautiful evening out there. Go play and go find some citizen science to be a part of somewhere. Go have some fun. Go learn something. Go teach something. You can do it. For my encore.
Isn't she so awesome? Oh my God. Well, thank you all so much for coming. On your way out, we are accepting a suggested donation of $5 to $10 if you did it on your way in. If you'd like to, please feel free on your way out. Like Karen said, if you're interested in participating in Moose Watch, hearing from Moose Watch, there's also an email sign up. You can also sign up for Citizens Superior's email list if you didn't do that on your way in. And then there's also brochures and other information material over there on a table if you want to learn more about what our organization does. Thank you so much and have a wonderful night.